You're listening to Ecto Portal, a journey into the unknown with Anthony Anderson and Verna Wilson.
I hope that you are seated comfortably with the light turned down and the curtains drawn.
Once again to another journey into the unknown, the unexplored, the unexplained Ecto Portal. I'm Anthony Anderson, your host, and I'm here with my co-host,
Verna Wilson.
And today we're going to tell a ghost story. Ooh.
Oh, how new for us.
How completely, utterly new for us.
Yeah.
It's the haunting of Gladstone Villa. It's actually an interesting storyline. It's a story about a man named Andrew Dexter, whose family called the imposing structure of their home in the late 1960s to the late 1970s. Now, like many cases of poltergeist activity, his life when he lived at the Gladstone Villa was full of strange occurrences, ghostly images, disembodied footsteps, and infant cries that plagued the Welsh family of 5. And now what follows is actually true, as relayed by Andrew. He said, my family and I lived at a large property called Gladstone Villa in the former mining town of Bargoed in the Caerphilly County Borough of South Wales Valleys in the UK. From 1969 to 1978, we experienced activity that defied rational explanation, such as lights going off and on. We witnessed electrical cables being pulled, and my grandfather Bill claimed to have had a glass bottle thrown towards him as he entered the main bedroom, missing him by inches. Now, I didn't personally see this myself, but I still recall the time he came from there with the broken bottle in his hands, and he told us what happened.
Jeez, I could have hit him on the head.
It could have. Now, there was the occasional sighting, but this was very rare indeed, so rare that in all the 9 years I lived there, I never once saw it, but I did hear it many times in the bedroom. It's still worth mentioning that my mother, Caroline, saw it on at least 2 occasions. Now, there were also regular footsteps heard in the main bedroom every evening. Sometimes during the day when we'd all be downstairs watching TV, one of us would turn the volume down to hear it more clearly, and my grandfather Bill would point to the ceiling and say, "He's by there. Oh, he's over there now," trying to make out where the footsteps were coming from exactly.
Well, he had enough time to hear them, so yeah.
Now, there were 5 members of the family that were living at the Gladstone Villa. My maternal grandfather, William Higgs, known as Bill to the family, and friends. He was a retired miner who worked at the local colliery. He was a short, bald man who liked nothing more than to listen to country music, Western LPs, Johnny Cash, Glenn Campbell, etc. And he liked to watch Westerns on TV with John Wayne or maybe Clint Eastwood. And my maternal grandmother was Rita Higgs. She was a short woman who was a housewife, completely teetotal, but liked to smoke. She also liked collecting garden gnomes and liked watching soap operas on TV.
Yeah, just regular people with various interests.
Mm-hmm. Now, he said, my mother, Caroline Dexter, met my father at the local bakehouse in Baldwin Street. She was the day shift regularly, and my father worked the night shift. He would stay behind to make her a cup of tea and chat. They dated for 3 years before they got married, and on Monday 1st, April 1968, the Beatles were number 1 with Lady Madonna, very apt. They did not get a place of their own, but they decided to live with my grandparents at Gladstone Villa, which was in Cardiff Road. Now, I was born on the 24th of August, 1969, when everyone was listening to the latest number one in the charts, Honky Tonk Woman by the Rolling Stones. It was soon after that my mother said that strange things started to happen. I was just a baby when she said it all started off rather quietly, like small tappings here, and nothing too noticeable, but in time the activity gradually increased. One time my mother said the family heard a noise like someone jumping down from the attic and onto the landing. Naturally thinking that someone was trying to break in, they went to see what was going on. When they got there, they found nobody there, but the hatch to the attic was open. Whatever it was eventually occupied itself in the main bedroom, which incidentally was one of my grandparents' room. It soon made its presence felt by walking around the bedroom, and the sounds of dragging could be heard. One day my mother went upstairs to that bedroom to get my father up for work so he could get ready for his night shift. When she got there, she was confronted by the sight of the ironing board placed on my father's torso as he slept.
Now that's freaky.
When he woke, he was astonished to find the situation he was in. He suspected my grandfather, Bill, was playing pranks, but in time he knew my grandfather was not responsible for it, and he told his work friends what was going on, and it got around that Gladstone Villa was haunted. Now, my parents separated in 1972, and my father left Gladstone Villa, but it wasn't because of what was going on at Gladstone Villa. It was just a breakdown of the marriage. They finally divorced in April 25th, 1975. The British band, the Bay City Rollers, were number one in the charts with Bye Bye Baby, again, very apt. It would have been amusing, but for the fact that what was going on there. I was barely 2 years old, so I have no memory of my father living at Gladstone Villa. But he would come to see me every Saturday to take me to see my paternal grandparents and to the local cinema. And great times, even though the paranormal activity still continued. As I got older, I too witnessed the activity for myself. I actually saw the poltergeist activity. I saw electrical cables being pulled by unseen forces. I saw the lights going off and on when my grandfather Bill would play records on Sunday as the family did the dinner. It would turn the music off. It took exception to the British band Slade and any religious TV shows my grandmother Rita would watch. The local police were also involved. I remember them popping up their heads in the attic, hesitating and not going in, but they suggested it was my father playing a prank on the family.
Now, why would he do that?
Well, divorces, people get nasty and vindictive.
All right.
A family friend, Mrs. Ivy French, she was more of a friend to my grandmother Rita. She was very skeptical when my grandmother told her that Gladstone Villa was haunted. I can still remember Ivy going into the bedroom, looking around and saying it was vibration from the traffic outside causing it. But she was soon to change her mind when she experienced it for herself. It was then that she suggested the local press and a medium. The medium was John Matthews, and he came to Gladstone Villa. He started by asking the family questions. He then began challenging the spirit to perform by knocking on the ceiling, and sure enough, it responded by knocking back at him. Now, at some point, John went into a trance to make contact with it, but he failed to get a name. He later confirmed the obvious that there was indeed a presence there, and it was an earthbound spirit, and it had unfinished business. A priest by the name of Graham Jones was called to Gladstone Villa. He blessed the property, and after a few prayers, he duly left, and it was quiet for a few months after that, no incidents. But it did return with a vengeance, and this time it decided to show itself. One evening, my grandfather Bill, my mother Caroline, and I were watching television. My grandmother Rita was reading a book, when all of a sudden my mother just so happened to look to her left, and she saw the full, solid figure of a monk standing by the doorway. We did not see this as we were otherwise occupied, but she later described it in detail as a monk in typical brown habit, complete with hood over the head, so she didn't see the face. It sounded very much like a 16th century Benedictine monk. Now, Fred Davies was a friend of my grandfather Bill. They worked together at the local colliery, and he would visit most evenings. Fred was a slim man who would wear a flat cap and glasses and smoked homemade cigarettes that hung from his lips when he spoke. He would sit in his favorite chair by the open fire and talk to the family and watch TV with us. One day, Fred was with us in this unusual place by the open fire. I was quietly playing with my toys by the sideboard. It was quiet when all of a sudden, there was one very loud bang. It was so loud that Fred ducked his head and ran to my mother for comfort. When it was quiet, we all went upstairs. My grandfather Bill would always be the first, and I would be the last. When we go to that bedroom, we found nothing that could account for that noise. Fred later told us that he ducked his head as he thought it was going to come through the ceiling.
That's pretty loud.
That's very loud. Fred told us of another experience he had at Gladstone Villa. My grandfather Bill liked to look out at the landing window that overlooked Cardiff Road and into Bargoed's town center. This time Fred joined him, and he said he felt something brush past him. When he looked, there was nothing there. The most frightening experience I had was when I was alone in that particular bedroom. I made sure the light was on, and it was quiet. I was lying on the bed facing the window that overlooked Cardiff Road, and I suddenly felt something heavy pounce on the bottom of the bed. I heard the bed springs go just once, and I felt the bed bounce. I didn't look straight away, but when I did, there was nothing there. I went down the stairs to tell my family, and we all went back up. We saw distinctive paw marks on the bed, like that of an animal. I later found out that my grandfather Bill had a black Labrador called Tovey, who died before I was born.
Oh, wow.
My grandfather Bill and mother Caroline claimed to have heard a baby crying there, but as I didn't hear it at the time, I took very little notice of what they said. Now, the activity got so bad that my mother, the grandmother, and I slept downstairs with the lights on.
Yikes.
It was only my grandfather Bill who was supposedly brave enough to sleep there. It was then that he himself had another experience in there. He told us he was lying on the bed when all of a sudden he couldn't move. He couldn't even shout. He couldn't cry out to us to help him. This could well have been sleep paralysis, but what he said, he heard something in the room with him. My grandmother Rita had her own experiences. One day she went upstairs into the room to get my grandfather up. She saw the boiler room door open wide by itself. She didn't stay there to see what it was, but she rushed out of the room. Another occasion she said she had the sensation of something pulling from under her foot, like she had stepped on his gown. We had the ghost for so long that my grandmother Rita gave it a pet name. She called him Johnny, and the grandfather Bill would shout out that name to provoke a reaction, but nothing would happen. Ivy Francis' son Charles got to hear about what was going on at Gladstone Villa, and he came along with some friends, and with my family's permission, they went into the bedroom. It frightened one of the friends. To this day, one of his friends still says it was a spooky place. And my mother Caroline had an operation on her too, and ended up crutches to supporting herself. The local nurse would tend to her foot, but my mother was sat on the chair. When the nurse came this day, the nurse knelt down to tend to her, and she told my mother not to hold her. My mother looked at my grandmother, Rita, in amazement, as she was not holding the nurse at all. My mother made her own conclusions that it was Johnny the ghost that was holding her, so as not for the nurse to hurt her.
Huh.
That's interesting.
That is.
The only time I heard the ghost being vocal was the time we were all in the room. One of us wanted to use the bathroom and we couldn't get in there. My grandfather Bill said, "He's behind there." I heard quite distinctly the sound of a Gregorian chant, and that was it, nothing more. We left in the summer of 1978 when two local businessmen bought the property, and Gladstone Villa was eventually converted into a small hotel, and its name changed to Red's Park Hotel. On the night before we moved, there was one final incident we experienced as if we knew we were going, and that it was this way of it saying goodbye. My mother, grandmother, and I got ready to go to sleep. The light was on, and we heard the doorknob turning as if someone was trying to get in. At first, I naturally suspected my grandfather Bill, as he was the only one who slept upstairs in that room, and we thought maybe it was him playing a prank. I called out to him, but there was no answer, no laugh that could give him away. We then heard our belongings that were packed in the hallway being thrown around. The next day we asked my grandfather Bill if it was him playing a joke on us. He insisted it wasn't him, and to this very day I believe him. I had my 40th birthday at Red's Park Hotel in August of 2009 for old time's sake, and it was the female staff that told me about the ghost, and I told them about what happened to me there 30 years before. The staff told me one of their personal experiences, lights going on and off, the odd sighting in room 5, a bride in white was seen, again as with claims of a baby crying that made no sense to me at the time. I did thorough research of the property in that Cardiff Road area, and I found out there's some very interesting things indeed. I found out that from Bargoed Library and local newspaper archives that Gladstone Villa dates back to 1900, and it was named after the former British Prime Minister William Gladstone. And I discovered that previous people that had lived there. The Kimmiett family in 1924, the newly coupled Michael and Evelyn Kimmiett, and their son named Elvin Kimmiett, He died at the property just 4 months old, according to the archives of the Cardiff newspaper, the Western Mail of that year. This explained the baby my mother and grandfather heard in the bedroom. Mrs. Evelyn Kimmiett died in 1970, soon after I was born. Maybe this is why the activity all started. I also found that there was a monastery on Baldwin Street where my parents met and worked, and there is a property directly opposite the former Gladstone Villa property in Cardiff Road, and it dated back to the 16th century. It's now a public house called the Rafa Club. A priest is said to be there, but it's sealed up. This explains the monk my mother saw. Now, what I said here is true. I wouldn't share it if I couldn't possibly back this up, and I've used real names as I have nothing to hide, and all I have said can be verified by family of those people I mentioned. Sadly, some of the people I mentioned are no longer with us. I challenge any skeptic or non-believer for themselves. I have no doubt at all. In fact, I'm 100% positive it was true. You can Google the property. It's still there in Cardiff Road, Bargoed, Wales, UK, near Caerphilly and Cardiff, and it seems to be thoroughly investigated and well worth documenting.
That is well worth documenting. I mean, he went ahead and he looked up the history of the place and found all these explanations for it. So to me, I think he did more than most people would.
Exactly. I mean, if a monastery is just down the road and you saw the monk and the baby cry, I mean, this goes to assume that if you believe in haunting, someone who died on a property, that's what you hear or see. I don't necessarily believe that's the case. I think people move around. I don't think they all stay. Just because you see a baby or you hear a baby cry doesn't necessarily mean it's the baby that died there.
Right.
Or a sighting of someone, a monk. I mean, if the monk was down the road, and the monastery was down the road, and this is in his place, it might have moves around.
Well, you know, what I found interesting is a lot of these hauntings didn't start until they heard the noise by the attic door, like somebody trying to get in. It could have been a former resident or somebody who lived there, and they thought, oh, I'm finally able to get back in my old place, and that's when all the crazy stuff started happening.
But it didn't sound like it was whatever this was, because it was there a long time. That was, 1608 until 78? It's 9-10 years.
That's a long time, yeah.
It didn't drive them out.
No.
It wasn't nasty to them and didn't do stuff to them.
So apparently it wasn't bad enough to do that.
No. I mean, obviously it was enough to Liv's turning on and off the lights, to open a door here or there, and the one or two times they saw something. But otherwise, walking around, footsteps in the bedroom. So there was some interaction going on, but I don't think it was malicious.
Yeah, and I mean I understand that this guy is talking about being very serious about and very sincere, but I don't think all of this could have happened unless somebody witnessed it. Nobody can make this stuff up.
No, and I imagine if this stuff happens on a regular basis in your family, it's just, oh yeah, this is more of the ghost. It's James doing it again.
I hear people do that now when activity goes on in their house and they see it a lot.
Which means they've learned to live with it.
Yeah.
It doesn't, I mean, some people I'm sure would be freaked out. Oh my God, I have to leave the house. Something's happening to the lights. You know, it could be they have bad lighting or bad electricity. Who knows?
Yeah, I've had paranormal activity in my house, including to this day, in my old flat, because my flat's pretty old. And I wouldn't say I've learned to live with it, but I just accept that it's going to happen every now and then. But I have actually told a few spirits, whoever they were, listen, I live here now. You can't stay here, and you can't keep following me around like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if they ever thought about saying that, but that's what I did.
You'd be like, look, you either pay rent or get out.
Right. Thank you. That's it. That's what I did. But I don't know. But people don't think about stuff like that.
No.
So.
That's true.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, this is an interesting, because you would almost call this a benign haunting, because it's nothing.
Yeah, it's nothing negative.
Evil. Nobody got pushed. Nobody got scratched.
Well, except for the bottle incident.
Oh yeah, the bottle being thrown. But maybe they were pissed off. Maybe he did something.
Maybe. We don't. We weren't there. So.
I don't know. That's weird.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that it's a hotel now. So now you can go stay at this hotel. The Red Pax Hotel?
Next time you're in
Red's
Wales,
Pack?
if you visit Wales, you can look it up.
That's right, the Red Pax Hotel.
Is that what
Reds,
it's called?
R-E-D-Z, Reds Park Hotel.
Yeah, Reds Park. Yeah,
R-E-D-Z,
that's what I thought it said.
P-A-R-C Hotel. Reds Park Hotel.
Yeah.
In Cardiff. On Cardiff Road. So if you ever want to stay at a haunted place,
There you
it
go.
might be worth checking out
Yeah.
just to see what happens.
I'm sure some guests have actually experienced stuff too. They probably haven't talked about it.
Oh, I'm sure they have. Absolutely.
It's not going to leave just because it's a hotel.
No, I would love to stay there just to see if there's anything still
It would
around.
be. Would be very cool. Yeah,
But I would have to plan that out well.
of course. It involves another trip, but
Darn.
maybe on your list.
Yep. My big growing list.
Right.
Okay, so that's another interesting haunting story we're sharing with you on Ecto Portal.
Yep. If anybody's ever stayed there or they know about the place, we'd like to hear more.
We would.
Yeah.
All right, folks, until next time, we'll talk to you later.
See you next
Bye.
time.
Royalty-free, copyright-free music by Kevin MacLeod and Ross Bugden.